Welcome to the South Bay FM Video Podcast. Join real estate broker Michael DeLay and Jeff Becker as they take you on a tour of one of San Diego's most vibrant communities, the South Bay. Michael and Jeff delve into the local real estate market and explore topics that matter to current residents, buyers, and sellers. Whether you're a longtime resident or considering a move to the area, this video podcast is your go-to source for all things South Bay. So sit back, relax, and let's shine a light on this amazing community.
Welcome to South Bay FM. This is Mike DeLay, and I'm the host with Jeff Becker, a realtor here in the South Bay. And we are honored today to bring to you my sixth grade teacher and now author in the South Bay who wrote a brand new book called Buck Up. Thank you and welcome, Mrs. Jasek.
Thank you.
Her full name is Mrs. Catherine Jasek, but I will not be referring to her today as that. As being in sixth grade with her and seventh grade as well. I just feel that Mrs. Jasek is the way to go, if that's all right with you. I wanted to introduce you today to Jeff, who actually is a recent author himself and wrote a poem. And you had me write a lot of poems in sixth grade, as you did hundreds and hundreds of students over the years. And we also learned really how to write our famous 5-paragraph essay. I've used that my entire life since I've known you, and it's been part of my regular writing habits and emails and everything since I graduated from college. So it's been a wonderful part of my life. Thank you very much for that. So Jeff, did you want to step in and say something?
I'm just very thankful to have you as our guest today. Before coming in real estate, I was a professor, special education, and so my heart is always near and dear to other teachers. Wondering if we could just start with you giving us a little bit of a background about, where did you grow up, and then how did that end up becoming a career of teaching for you?
I grew up in Chula Vista. I was born in San Diego, so I'm a native. I grew up right there on 2nd Avenue, and I have a twin brother, and I have an older brother. Oh. And my twin brother and I went to a school called St. Rose of Lima, which is the Catholic school where I taught Mike. My husband and I met in 3rd grade there, and we've been married almost 57 years.
Oh, wonderful.
So I always wanted to teach. I think back when I was choosing a career, you could be a secretary or you could be a nurse or you could be a teacher. I definitely wasn't going to be a nurse because that's too much responsibility. So I decided I'd like to be a teacher, and I love to read. So what better job than to have a job where you can read every day with kids?
Well, you probably don't, I'm sure you remember this, but I think every one of us that went to St. Rose and had you as a teacher, remember how we come in after school or after recess or lunch or PE, and we were running around and we were sweaty and we were hot and we were all amped up, and you would sit down and you would read to us. And it's amazing that you wrote a book that's probably based on around the same age group. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you basically had this amazing, relaxing voice that would get everyone back into kind of a calmness to start and finish up the rest of the day. And I used to love that. That was one of my favorite memories of you and doing that. So that was just a fun time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Do you remember anything that I read?
You read it was in particular, they were kind of books that I would have never. I'm not a big into the normal style books, but they were like the bubblegum books, I think they were called, and they were. It was I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I thought they had like the name of like bubblegum books or something like that, and they were about. I forgot the famous author. She was a famous author that you used to read from that you liked a lot, and I cannot remember off the top of my head right now. But they were relaxing books, and they were all teenager books. It wasn't about the specific book. It was about the way you'd read it, and I was always fascinated with that story, whatever it was during that time. So.
Oh, thank you. When I was at St. Rose, we had all nuns except for one teacher, Mrs. McLaughlin, in 5th grade, and she used to read to us. She was the only one.
Well, you were the only one for me. So
I'm curious, going back to even when you're growing up, how did you see San Diego and Chula Vista? What was different then besides now? So obviously, the last 20 years, we've had major growth in Chula Vista, especially east of the 805. What was the feeling? What was the vibe? What did people do for a living who lived in Chula Vista?
It was a small town. There were 25,000 people.
Wow.
My dad had a real estate office about 3 doors from Labella's, which is the famous pizza place.
Yes.
And there was a bicycle shop across the street, and it was just a place where you felt very safe. You could walk, you could ride your bikes everywhere. So that's the kind of town I grew up in. I was one of the first ones to go to Southwestern College, and it seemed like such a long way out there. We would go and we'd stay all day because it was way too far to drive back in. And that was just our perception of that.
There wasn't much. I'm sorry, don't interrupt. There wasn't much around there other than there's that one housing development and some shopping. That was about it.
Right. In fact, when I grew up on 2nd Avenue, there were tomato fields and things behind my house, a block away east of us.
So you were a Hilltop Lancer as well, right?
I was not.
Oh, you were not?
No. I had I have a twin brother named David. Mm-hmm. And so David and I lived right on 2nd Avenue, so we had our choice. We could either go to Chula Vista or to Hilltop. And he said, I don't care where you're going, but I'm going to Chula. And I wanted to go to Hilltop because my husband now was going to Hilltop and my girlfriends were going to Hilltop. But it seemed very silly to go to 2 different schools if you're twins.
Right.
So I went to Chula with my brother.
Oh, wow. So you were a Spartan.
I was. But my husband and all his family and both our daughters are all Hilltop. So awesome. It's lonely.
That's funny.
I wanted to ask about, going back to your teaching, what did you find the most difficult trying to teach students to be creative writers or to just write in good format?
You know what? I didn't let them write a lot of creative things because I didn't know how to do it myself. And when I finally wrote the book, I sat out and read about 20 books on my own on how to write fiction because I didn't know. So we concentrated really on the 5-paragraph essay, and I used to do power graphs. Did you do that with me, Mom?
Yes. Although I can tell you that was one area I was not very strong. Although I wasn't very strong, I did a lot of things back then. That was not one of them. So is that the one where we did the spaceships? Basically, I called them, where you'd make part of a sentence and then you'd put it down and then you'd put arrows and put the words on other parts.
Oh, that's like diagramming.
Diagramming. There you go.
No, a power graph was. I would give a topic sentence, and you kids would have to come back with 2 sentences to support my topic sentence.
Uh-oh.
But you were never allowed to use a linking verb.
Oh.
And you found that very difficult.
I believe that.
And I would take your paper, and I'd say, you better check it over, because if you're missing a period or you've got a misspell word, you're going to do it all over again. And, of course, you did it all over again, all of you kids.
Wow. Well, I don't remember specifics, but I could tell you the way you taught us how to do note-taking and the way you taught us to write the 5-paragraph essay. I used that very 5-paragraph essay to apply to San Diego State, and that alone waived my, maybe what I wrote too, but they waived my requirement to do freshman English in college, and it was just from that. And I could tell you I didn't really feel like I've ever learned a whole lot more from English other than what you taught me.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
I had a similar experience, and so this is applause to all of our English teachers. 9th grade, I had a wonderful teacher who kind of was trying to explain to everybody, if you're going to write a story, there's a first paragraph, a body, and the last paragraph, and there's got to be kind of a beginning, middle, and end, and even within the paragraphs. And for some reason, the way he explained it, that really clicked with me. And then when I was a senior, we were required to do a very serious book report. And again, had a wonderful teacher, and that turned out to be an amazing experience for me. I've just turned 59, and after my career, I've not done any creative writing. I had to take care of my father who was ill last year, and I ended up being awake at 3 a.m. often, and all of a sudden some ideas for some poems came to mind. And I wrote them down, showed them to a friend, and he said, these are not bad. I got one published. I got another one published. Then I've just recently submitted a poem to a contest that was sponsored by the Surfing Madonna organization, which is a local group that does, preservation of the ocean. They do some amazing things as far as getting disabled people into the water so they can enjoy it as well. Turns out, by luck, I got first place. And if you don't mind, I'd be very happy to read the poem for you.
I would very
and
much.
And you can criticize me.
I would never criticize you.
The fun thing about it was that I wrote this poem with my son, John Henry, and the poem was inspired by this photograph. I don't know if the camera can see it, but this is the 3-year-old son of a dear friend of our family, Carly, who has now moved to Hawaii. And so the goal of the poems, or the contest, was to write about the ocean, land, and sky. So the name of the poem is Just for Him. The sky could be less blue, the waves less powerful, the land less majestic, but their splendor exists just for him. The marine world, surrounded by beaches, unlike the worlds he already knows, his sky, its wind, clouds, and rainbows, his land, its rocks, trees, and animals. An excited but scared 3-year-old boy, his initial voyage on the deep water, first mate on his brother's surfboard, salty mist in his eyes, the shore so far away, bobbing up and down like a bathtub toy, waiting for just the right wave. This one, kneeling in front, brother's hands on his waist. Ready, set, pop, up he bravely stands. Exhilaration like he has never known. A small wave, but to him a 10-foot swell. Supreme joy on his suntanned face. Hang loose displayed on his small hands. Today's introduction to the Hawaiian waters, a mere glimpse of its vastness and spirit. Many magical creatures yet to meet, sea turtles, dolphins, and manta rays. Soon, elders will teach him about the sea and its delicate balance of life. But for today, in this young boy's mind, nature's living playground exists just for him.
Oh, I like that so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Excellent.
I enjoyed that.
Great figurative language.
Thank you.
First mate and wonderful, very specific words. I really like that.
Thank you. I kind of bring this up mainly as a way of saying thank you to teachers. And it's surprising a skill or knowledge that you've learned all the way in high school may not appear or be useful to you or something you can enjoy until much later in life.
Right.
And again, and writing is something you can do for the entirety of your life. So thank you.
So tell me about this poem. Did you write it in one session, or did you go back and refine it over and over, or?
I had, once I saw the photo, and actually a lot of the poems I've written have been inspired by paintings. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of friends who are painters. And I realized, I wonder why I've chosen to purchase this painting. There's something about it. And usually that inspires a poem. When I saw this photo and heard kind of the boundaries of the contest, it kind of popped to me. And I knew that it was going to be a good poem. I showed it to my son. He said, it's good, but it needs a lot of shining. And so with him, picking the right words, changing things around. But for me, what I've noticed is if a poem kind of comes to me in a whole, I have a good feeling for the whole thing, it turns out well. If I say, I'm going to sit and write a poem about a wristwatch, it's not going to be as good. There's got to be kind of that core inspiration. Did you find that to be true for your book?
Right, you can't force it.
You can't force it.
No.
How long did it take you to write your book?
Oh, well, I retired almost 16 years ago, and so for 15 years, I took notes.
Oh, wow.
And my family makes fun of me because I lived my whole life on note cards. I write notes to everybody on note cards. So I have these note card boxes, 10 of them, filled with these note cards about the gold rush or about the Civil War or whatever. And so I did that for a long time. And finally I just said, you can't just keep taking notes. You better put that pen to your paper. So COVID hit, and I bowled 2 leagues a week. So when they closed the bowling alleys and I had nowhere to go, I said, okay, this is the time. So I sat down, and I had never written anything. But I just said, okay, let's see. I think we'll start right in the middle, So I started with conversation. And I just went from there, and I'd sit there at night and think about what, I just kept thinking of conversations, and then I'd get up the next morning and go to the computer and write it down.
So what was your hardest part of the book, the end or writing the beginning?
Well, I had it outlined. It was almost like a 52 by 70 magnetic board, and I spent a lot of time outlining that thing. I knew exactly what the middle was and what the end was.
So writing the that is so funny. When I first learned to write, and I got much better at it over time, but when I first started writing what we were talking about from the very beginning, your 5-paragraph essay, I used to have to start writing my 3 paragraphs in the middle and then go back and write my introduction so I could get it correct so that I could finish with the conclusion. And then as I got better and better at it over time, I was able to formulate the idea in the introduction and then do that. It's almost a little bit like how you ended up writing your book, in the form of you started in the middle, it sounds like, in the conversation, and then you took that towards the end, and then you write the beginning, or how did you do that?
No, what I meant was I started the beginning with a conversation.
Ah, okay.
They say to start there, and I decided I would never just start with a lot of description, because you'll lose them the first paragraph.
Gotcha. So you got people into the conversation, and then went on. You want to talk a little bit about your book? Like, what is it about, and what is the trajectory of it? Obviously, you don't want to give it away, but at the same time, you want to get a little bit of interest here.
Well, I was going to write a book about the gold rush. And when I first started, I knew there was an 1849 gold rush, but I didn't know that they had several other gold rushes, some in Montana, some in Colorado, So a friend of ours took us to a place called Bodie. It's up on the California border, probably east of Sacramento, and there are 200,000 people who visit this ghost town every year. It's very, very popular.
Wow.
The town is in a state of arrested development, which means that you can't go into any of the buildings, but you can look in the windows and you can see the dishes on the tables and all that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
So, but they're not going to repair anything. They're just going to let it eventually
Slowly
right
fall apart.
But there were like 10,000 people almost who lived there in 1878. Wow. And so when a friend took us to this place, it was around 2009, I decided, well, this would be a great place to write about instead of 1849, so I made it then.
Okay.
And then I had to adjust my thinking, because you had to find people who were alive during that time. And like there was one woman who I knew, I didn't know her, but I'd always heard about her and read about her. Her name was Ina Kulbreth. And I only knew about her because I was so interested in Jack London. And she was the librarian, and she was his mentor. And so when I discovered that she lived during the right time, I researched her and found out there was so much more to her than I knew.
That's neat.
Yeah. So then I decided I wanted to write about a little boy, and I wanted it to be a coming of age story where he would learn things and mature and change. And so I created a little boy named Jody.
Jody. Okay.
Jody.
And that's the main character?
That's the main character. Although the man who mentors him is named Nick Pratt.
Okay.
And I had always had that name ready. I have a grandson named Nick, and I cannot convince him that I didn't name him. He thinks I did, but I did not. So I've had this name forever, so I had that. And then I just...
Well, congratulations to Nick, by the way. I understand he's graduating from college this year.
He is, next month. I'm very proud of him.
So
So,
sorry for that.
oh, that's all right.
Please get back to your book.
Well, and then I've become, the older I get, the more interested I am in women's rights. And so I really included that in my story. because I really felt like women didn't have many rights. So I had a woman in the book named Mary Kay, and she was all about women's rights. And Nick never listened to one word she ever said until he finally at the end he did. So not only was a change for Jody to grow and mature, but Nick also grew and matured.
Oh, wow.
Great.
Yeah. And it was a book about people helping people, because when you find yourself in a desolate town like they did, I mean, you had to ship every single thing in. If you wanted a piece of celery, it had to be brought in. There was nothing there. Bodie's 8,000 feet up.
Oh, wow.
And so we were there once in September, and it was so cold, the wind just whips through there.
Wow.
So anyway, it's about people helping people and strong women taking care of other women and trying to, encourage them.
Wow, that's a neat.
So-
So with that was an intentional part of the book, is to have a strong woman character that would. Is she the heroine, or is there a heroine in the story, or how is that set up?
Not really. It's really about Nick and Jody.
Gotcha. I gotcha. And
But
it's about family.
It's
or
all about
people
family.
taking care of one another, the
Right.
community.
They own a boarding house, and so all these characters live at this boarding house.
Nice.
Gotcha. Now, did St. Rose make it in at all from all your years of being there at St. Rose? Did any of that affect your writing in this book?
No, because St. Rose was too recent. This is
Gotcha.
back,
Gotcha.
when they had just schools with one teacher who taught several grades.
Gotcha.
But I did want to tell you that Nick has a twin brother. My
Yes.
grandson, Nick,
Yes.
has a twin brother. And he was going to Southwestern. He had a college class, and he called me one day and he said, I have to do a paper, and it has to be people writing letters to each other. So he said, do you have any ideas? And I said, well, what's your time period? He said, about 1850 to 1900. I said, why don't you get a former slave and have him write to somebody? I don't know who, maybe his cousin. You know what? Maybe he could write to a cowboy, because you want two male characters. And by my talking to my grandson about the Chisholm Trail and cowboys, I included a character in the book who I had no intention of, I had never even thought about him, but he's a cowboy.
Wow.
Who was on the Chisholm Trail.
That's great.
Quick question. Did you feel like you really knew these characters from the time you started, or their personalities evolved as you were writing and as the story went along?
You know what? You don't know me very well. Mike knows me. I am just absolutely detail-oriented.
Okay.
And so I have a book that I created at home, and it has 3 pages on every character. I know their favorite color. I knew where they were born. I knew their best friend's name. So I knew those characters before I wrote about them.
Now, they say an author often writes about themselves somehow within the book. Did you find yourself in the book, like writing somewhere? Is there a character that's kind of Mrs. Jasek?
I think Nick and I have the same sense of humor. So, but my family's all from Montana. So as a nod towards my mom and dad and my brother, who were all born in Montana, I included a character named Philip Deisensheimer. And my family's from a little town of 1,000 people called Phillipsburg. And it was named after Philip Deisensheimer.
Ah, okay. So a little nod to the past.
A nod to my family.
That's
yeah.
wonderful. It's neat. So, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, what advice do you have, after this experience, what advice could you give to someone who hasn't written a book before? Where to start? I'm very impressed. I think it's a great idea, trying to be as prepared as possible. I think it's possible that an author just starts writing and they just get lost and, not sure where it's going.
I think I had some really good advice from one of the husbands of one of my former students, Stephanie Escajeda's husband,
wow.
who writes for Family Guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about a book called Save the Cat. And he said, you have to do something immediately to make the audience like your character. So I had Nick, helping this little boy and thanking the stagecoach driver and do all kinds of things just so people would like him immediately.
In fact, I saw Stephanie actually just recently got a writing thing for herself. If I saw right on Facebook. So
I don't know. Tell me.
I think she just, and I apologize. I'm just from memory, but she actually just got a writing for a new series herself. So
Good for her.
Congratulations to her. So
Oh, yeah, she's one of the smartest kids we ever had.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's a smart family.
Smart family.
So
I'm impressed with your book too. I'm getting the idea of getting the right setting for the book is important. So I'm thinking Gold Rush. There's some drama. People come. It's a very hard life, but there's the potential of becoming very rich.
Yes.
Or not. Maybe not making any money. So it already has some built-in drama, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. I read many, many books about the gold rush and about mining. I hope I got it right. But, I mean, there was so much. It was very dangerous work.
Okay.
If you went down into the mines, you might not come back out.
From what you have read, how many people actually made it rich? Was 1%, 50%?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Curious.
know. Yeah.
Because again, the dream could keep people there for a long time.
Right.
But if the success rate is very low, that would be nice to
I
know.
think if you owned the mine, you became rich.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Otherwise, you worked for $4 a day, which was a lot of money back then.
And then that money would go to spend for your food and your equipment
Right.
stuff, right?
Yes.
The general store.
One thing I learned was that drinks were 12 cents a piece, but you would never buy one because you'd be considered a cheapsteak. So you would have to buy two. So that's where the 2-bit coin came in.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you have a third grandson as well, Alex, a neat thing, Jeff, that kind of happened in our families is that Mrs. Jasek taught me. Her daughter actually got to teach my son as a 7th grade teacher.
Awesome.
And her grandson, Alex, became very close best friends with my son Michael, and they actually have pictures together where they graduated together 30 years later from the time you and I first met.
They are best friends for sure.
They
Yeah.
love hanging out, that's for
Yeah.
sure. So it's fun seeing their college years now and
Right.
Styles, and they're golfing together now, and Nick as well. And
Yes.
so it's fun.
So like you and I have history together, and now those boys
It's
have.
fun to keep watching it, isn't it? And that's the neat thing about community. And to kind of change subjects slightly, but that's St. Rose always reminded me that religion is one thing, but it's the community of the people that are around it that makes it so important. That's why when you were talking about your book, I was thinking St. Rose is such a community that it creates. There's a picture of Alex and Michael.
Oh, there they are.
Yep. So, and that was their graduation day actually in 2018.
And
so.
that's the St. Rose Church.
That's the St. Rose Church right there. And community is such an important part of St. Rose, and actually for any organization at all. If you're going to be part of an organization, that community of people is a big part of it. And when you were talking about your book, it just kept popping into my head. In Chula Vista, the reason our theme actually is the South Bay FM is because we're trying to focus on community within an area that has a lot of pride and joy, and we're seeing a change that's also happening in the South Bay. And so I think people are going to be wanting to tune in and hear about the new things that are happening almost daily now in the South Bay with the Port District changes and the hospitals being put in and the schools being put in and potentially colleges. And so that was just kind of part of what we're doing. And that's why having you as a guest and talking about your book, and we now have hopefully famous authors here in the South Bay. So that will be a fun thing. So
Tell us where we're going to have you sign our copies of the book after we're finished. Where can people get a copy of the book?
Amazon.
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. This is where I got my copy as well.
Oh, thank you.
okay, I know a very important question coming with it. Are you going to make an Audible version?
My daughter Monica suggests that would be a good idea, but I haven't decided.
You have a great voice. I think it would be cool.
I think it would be amazing. That would be reminding so many. I mean, how many people do you think you taught over the years at St. Rose?
About 1,000. Oh, at St. Rose? Before I taught at St. Rose, I taught in Orange County.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And I taught at It's Cathedral today, but it was uni when I taught there.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the
So
Catholic high school.
And you've taught about 1,000, you said? So you have 1,000 people that you've touched their lives, and most of them, I'm assuming, you've read to?
I think so.
Oh, you got to do an Audible book.
I don't think Monica had that in mind. I think she was going to have somebody else read it.
Oh, no, it would have to be you.
Oh, I never thought about that.
A question I've had in my mind is, do you remember Mike as a student? Was he well behaved, or was he the troublemaker?
Oh, no. He always had a great sense of humor, and he was always such a nice guy.
Ah, that's very sweet, but I was a troublemaker. At least that's how I remember myself.
You know,
There's our 8th grade class right
Oh my
there.
gosh.
So that was not our 6th grade year, but that was our 8th grade class. That was your first classes at St. Rose that
I
you
started
taught
in
6th grade.
83.
Yep. So
Yep.
many, speaking of intelligent people, we have quite a few in that group right there. So
That's awesome.
fun group of people.
It was a very nice group of people.
So.
And I don't remember all 1,000 kids,
Oh,
but
of
I
course.
definitely remember you, Mike.
But they would have remembered you. There's no question. You've got to be just about all of their favorite teachers. So.
Oh, no, Sister Mary Daniel was way up there, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Sister Mary Daniel is memorable for sure.
Yes.
She just like you had an impact on all of us. So
Well, thank you.
thank you.
I think we'll wind up with a quick question. How do you see the future of Chula Vista? We're expanding, we're growing, lots of new things. How does Chula Vista keep its history and the parts that have been great about it?
You know, I don't know. Now that we've got this bayfront coming, I just think it's going to change everything. It's not going to be this quiet community that it's always been. I think we're going to have more traffic, and I'm not real happy about it.
Got it. It's going to be different than the way it's been, right?
It's going to be very different.
Got it.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Jasek,
Thank
for
you.
coming in today. Really appreciate it. And we wish you the best of luck in Buck Up. And we hope that you sell thousands and thousands of copies. And we get to hopefully reintroduce this to lots of people that didn't know you wrote a book. So thank you.
I thank you very much for inviting me.
And as soon as this hits the New York Times bestsellers list, we're going to be happy to interview you again and to find out what your next book is going to be.
I think my husband would divorce me. But
Does this have a follow-up ability, this book?
yes.
Oh, wow.
A sequel?
Oh,
cool.
we're waiting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you.
again.